All right, so you guys sent us a ton of stuff about this International Energy Agency 2024 World Energy Outlook.
Yeah,
And we're going to take a deep dive into it.
lots to unpack there.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's exciting, though. I mean, this is the future of energy we're talking about here.
It really is fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
A real snapshot of where we're headed with this global energy transition.
So what are we hoping to find out in this deep dive? I mean,
What's the big question?
what's the question?
Yeah.
Like, what does the 2024 World Energy Outlook tell us about the state of global energy transition? Like the good, the bad, how it impacts you and me.
Well, one of the first things that jumps out from the report is this idea that global energy demand is just skyrocketing, right?
It's going up.
And it's really being driven by developing economies.
Okay.
Places like, India, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Africa.
Makes sense as people, sort of move up in the world. They need more energy to power their lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As people's lives improve, they want access to things like refrigerators and cars and better homes.
All of that requires energy.
All of that requires energy. That's right.
Yeah.
But here's where things get interesting. Clean energy is growing too, and it's growing at a pace we've never seen before.
Really?
In 2023 alone, over 560 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity was added globally.
Okay. Break that down for me. 560 gigawatts. I mean, what does that even look like?
Picture like a massive field of solar panels just stretching as far as you can see.
Wow.
Or countless wind turbines harnessing the power of the wind.
Okay.
We're talking about serious scale here,
Yeah.
and it's translating into major investments too. Global investment in clean energy projects is now approaching $2 trillion annually.
$2 trillion.
Almost double what's going into fossil fuels.
Wow, that's a lot of momentum behind the shift to clean energy.
It really is.
So it sounds like things are moving in the right direction.
They are, but there's a but.
There's always a but.
Always a but. Right, even with all this progress, the world is still not on track to meet those climate goals laid out in the Paris Agreement.
So we're not moving fast enough.
Not quite fast enough. The IEA's projections show a potential warming of 2.4 degrees Celsius by 2100 under current policies.
And that's not good.
Not ideal. That's a far cry from the 1.5-degree target that scientists say is crucial.
Yeah. Okay. So a little bit of good news, a little bit of bad news.
Yeah, in fact.
One of the things that really jumped out at me in the report is this prediction that demand for each fossil fuel, coal, oil, and gas
All of them.
will peak by 2030.
It's a bold statement.
Peak this decade.
Yeah.
That's huge. What's driving that?
Well, there are a few factors at play. First, renewables are becoming increasingly cost competitive.
Okay.
In many cases, they're now cheaper than fossil fuels.
That makes sense.
Second, governments are enacting policies to support this transition, phasing out fossil fuels.
Okay.
And third, consumers are playing a role too, opting for electric vehicles and energy-efficient appliances.
So it's kind of like everything's coming together at the same time.
Yeah, it's a confluence of economic forces, policy decisions, and individual choices.
Okay, so demand peaks by 2030. Does that mean fossil fuels are just gone?
Well, not quite that simple.
Not quite.
It's not a light switch. For example, the IEA also projects a potential oversupply of oil and LNG in the late 2020s.
Okay.
So even though overall demand might decrease, there could still be more supply than the market needs.
Okay.
And that could lead to some interesting dynamics in energy markets, increased competition, price fluctuations, who knows?
Yeah. Okay, so we've got to keep an eye on that.
Absolutely.
Now, one country that keeps popping up in all these reports is China. They seem to be at the center of this whole energy transformation.
Oh, they are a major player, for sure.
Yeah.
And the reports are filled with these really impressive statistics about China's clean energy dominance.
Yeah, it's crazy. The numbers are mind-blowing.
It's remarkable what they've accomplished. Just consider this. In 2023, China was responsible for 60% of all new renewable energy capacity added globally.
60%, that's more than everyone else combined.
It's incredible.
What does that dominance actually look like in the real world?
Well, think about it this way. The IEA predicts that by the early 2030s, China's solar energy output alone could exceed the total electricity demand of the entire United States.
Oh, wow.
They're not just leading the way, they're operating on a whole different scale.
So does that mean that China is going to, control the global clean energy market?
Well, it's hard to say for sure, but their role as a major producer of these technologies could definitely influence cost and availability globally.
Okay.
But it's important to remember that even China faces its own set of challenges.
Right.
Integrating all that renewable energy into their grid. streamlining permitting for new projects, managing the environmental impacts of large-scale development.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
So even a clean energy powerhouse like China has its work cut out for it.
Absolutely no one said this transition would be a walk in the park.
Okay, now another big trend that stood out to me in these reports is this huge surge in electricity demand.
Yeah, electrification is everywhere.
Everything.
It seems like everything is going electric these days.
Cars, homes, industries, everything.
Exactly. And the IEA report really highlights how significant this shift is.
Yeah.
In the past decade, global electricity demand has been growing at twice the rate of overall energy demand.
Twice the rate? Wow, why is that?
Well, there are several factors driving this, the increasing adoption of electric vehicles, a growing demand for cooling as the world gets hotter,
Oh, that makes sense, yeah.
and the expanding energy footprint of data centers and artificial intelligence.
So more demand for cooling? I mean, is
Eh,
that just because it's getting hotter because of climate change?
Well, it's partly due to climate change. Yes, summers are getting hotter and longer, but it's also because as incomes rise globally, more people can afford air conditioners.
Right. More people have access to that kind of technology.
It's a bit of a feedback loop.
So how much more electricity are we talking about for cooling?
Well, get this, the IEA report states that the increase in cooling demand just in 2023 alone consumed more electricity than the entire Middle East uses today.
Wow. So we've got this massive wave of electrification happening, but it's also happening against this backdrop of like a changing energy security landscape.
Yeah, energy security is becoming a much more complex issue.
The sources I shared really emphasize how energy security is no longer just about oil and gas.
It's true. The IEA report dives deep into this evolving concept of energy security. While those traditional concerns about oil and gas supplies are still there, especially for countries in Asia that rely heavily on imports,
Yeah.
the transition to clean energy brings a whole new set of vulnerabilities to the table.
So what kind of vulnerabilities? I mean, what are we talking about specifically?
But think about the stability of electricity grids that rely on renewable energy sources like solar and wind.
Oh, yeah, they're intermittent, right?
Exactly. They're not always available when you need them. And then there's the growing risk of cyber attacks targeting energy infrastructure.
Oh, yeah, that's scary.
And extreme weather events can disrupt energy supplies as well.
So it's not just about like where your energy comes from anymore.
No, it's about the resilience of the entire energy system.
Okay.
How well can it adapt to disruptions and recover quickly?
So a whole new way of thinking about energy security.
Exactly.
Another really important point that comes up in the reports is the idea of equity in the energy transition.
Yeah, this is crucial.
It can't just be like a rich country phenomenon, right?
Absolutely. The IEA really stresses that clean energy transitions need to be equitable, and there's a lot of work to be done in this area.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still millions of people around the world who don't even have access to basic electricity,
Yeah.
let alone clean energy.
Right.
This is a matter of basic human development and social justice.
So how do we make sure that developing countries aren't left behind in this transition? I mean, what are some of the obstacles they face in accessing these new clean energy solutions?
One of the biggest challenges is the high cost of financing clean energy projects in developing economies.
Okay, so even if the technology is getting cheaper, the financing is still a problem.
Yeah, the report actually highlights that the cost of financing a typical solar project in many developing countries is more than double what it is in advanced economies.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
It is, and that creates a significant barrier.
So what can we do about that? I mean, how do we help bridge that gap?
Well, this is where international cooperation becomes really important. Developed countries have a responsibility to help,
Okay.
not just through financial assistance, but also through technology transfer and capacity building,
Okay.
supporting developing countries so they can leapfrog to clean energy solutions and address both energy poverty and climate change at the same time.
Okay, so we're at a crossroads.
We are.
We've got this amazing clean energy momentum building, but we're not moving fast enough to meet those ambitious climate goals.
Yeah, it's a race against time.
And we have these equity issues to address.
Absolutely. We need to make sure everyone benefits.
So where do we go from here?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah, what are the possible paths forward?
Well, the IEA report actually outlines a couple of different scenarios to help us understand the potential pathways.
Okay.
One is called the Announced Pledges Scenario, or APS.
APS.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
in this scenario, the IEA assumes that all the climate pledges and targets announced by governments around the world are actually met in full and on time.
Okay, so this is the best case scenario.
Sort of a best-case scenario, everyone keeps their promises.
What happens in that scenario?
Well, the energy transition really picks up. Speed renewable energy sources become the dominant form of energy globally. The use of fossil fuels declines dramatically, and global emissions start to fall rapidly.
That sounds good.
It does.
But how realistic is it? I mean, we've seen countries fall short of their climate pledges before.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's often a gap between ambition and action when it comes to climate policy.
So is there like a more ambitious scenario?
There is. The IEA also lays out a more ambitious scenario called the Net Zero Emissions by 2050 scenario, or NZE.
NZE, okay.
This scenario charts a course for limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
So this is like the all-in scenario.
This is it. The world fully commits to decarbonizing the energy system.
What would that look like?
Well, it would require a pretty radical transformation of the global energy system. Massive investments in renewable energy efficiency, emerging technologies like carbon capture and storage,
Wow.
widespread adoption of electric vehicles, and a move towards a more decentralized and flexible energy system.
So basically no more fossil fuels.
Essentially, yes, phased out entirely by the middle of the century.
That's a pretty big change.
It's a big lift, but the IEA argues that it's achievable. They highlight all the technological advancements that have already been made in areas like renewable energy and battery storage.
Okay.
And they outline the policy frameworks and financial mechanisms that could accelerate the transition,
So it's possible.
according to the IEA. Yes.
It's possible.
And it's important to remember, they have a reputation for being grounded in data and analysis.
Right. They're not known for making like pie-in-the-sky predictions.
Exactly.
So this is a serious assessment.
It is.
Okay, so we've got these two scenarios, the APS, which is based on meeting existing pledges, and the NZE, which aims for net zero by 2050.
Yeah. Two different pathways.
But how do these scenarios translate into like real-world impacts for people?
That's a great question. The IEA report really emphasizes that the choices we make about energy today will have direct consequences for everything,
Really, everything.
from the air we breathe to the jobs we have to the affordability of energy itself.
So it's not just about abstract targets and global trends.
No, it's about real-world consequences for individuals and communities.
And those consequences are going to be different depending on where you live, right?
Absolutely. Your location, your job, how your country chooses to navigate this transition.
Yeah.
It all matters.
For example, the report talks about how certain industries are going to be significantly impacted by this shift to clean energy.
Oh, yeah, some industries will see major disruptions.
Like what?
Well, the most obvious example is the fossil fuel industry.
Oh, yeah, of course.
As the world transitions away from oil, coal, and gas, that industry is going to face some serious challenges.
What about the people who work in those industries?
That's a critical consideration.
Yeah.
The report actually emphasizes the importance of retraining programs, job creation initiatives, and social safety nets to support workers who are displaced by this transition.
So it's not just about building wind turbines and solar panels.
No, it's about building a more inclusive and resilient economy.
That works for everyone.
Exactly.
Okay, what about consumers? What kind of changes can they expect to see in terms of energy prices?
Well, the outlook on prices is a bit complex. In the short term, we might see lower prices as that oversupply of oil and gas keeps costs down.
Okay.
But in the long run, the economics of clean energy will likely lead to more stable and potentially even lower energy costs, especially as technologies like solar and wind become even more cost-effective.
Okay, so some volatility in the near term, but ultimately clean energy should be cheaper.
That's the general idea. But of course, a lot depends on government policies and how effectively they're implemented.
Right. Energy is a highly regulated sector.
It is.
Government policies can have a huge impact.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the policy tools that governments can use to kind of shape this energy transition?
Well, there are several. Carbon pricing mechanisms like carbon taxes or cap-and-trade systems can create economic incentives to reduce emissions.
Okay.
Subsidies and tax breaks for renewable energy technologies can help accelerate their adoption.
Right.
Energy efficiency standards for buildings and appliances can reduce overall energy demand. And investments in grid modernization can make the electricity system more resilient and better able to handle a higher share of renewables.
Okay, so governments have a big role to play.
They do.
But what about individuals? I mean, what can people do in their everyday lives to kind of contribute to this shift?
Well, it's true that individual actions alone won't solve climate change,
Right.
but they are a vital part of the solution.
Okay.
The IEA report makes it clear that consumer choices can have a significant impact on energy demand and emissions.
So what are some of the most impactful things that people can do?
Well, one of the most effective actions is choosing an electric vehicle for your next car purchase.
Okay.
Electric vehicles are becoming increasingly affordable. The technology is constantly improving.
Yeah.
By switching to an electric vehicle, you can significantly reduce your reliance on fossil fuels and lower your carbon footprint.
Okay, that's a big one. But what about for people who aren't in a position to buy a new car right now?
There are plenty of smaller, everyday actions people can take.
Okay, like with...
Well, reducing your energy consumption at home is a great place to start.
Okay.
Make sure your home is properly insulated. Switch to energy-efficient appliances. Be mindful of your energy use habits.
Okay, those are good tips, but I think sometimes people feel overwhelmed by the scale of this whole climate challenge.
It can feel daunting.
Yeah, and they wonder if their individual actions really make a difference.
I understand that sentiment.
Yeah.
It's not about guilt-tripping people,
Right.
but it's about empowering them to make informed choices.
Okay.
And sometimes those choices are more about what we buy and consume than how we behave at home.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think about the food you eat, the clothes you wear, the products you use.
Okay.
Everything we consume has an energy footprint.
Right.
By choosing products that are made sustainably with minimal environmental impact, we can support companies that are committed to being part of the solution.
So it's about being conscious consumers.
Exactly. Using our purchasing power to support businesses that align with our values.
And also, don't underestimate the power of advocacy. Absolutely.
Like talking to your friends and family about climate change,
Yes.
about the energy transition, raising awareness,
Right.
contacting your elected officials, letting them know you care about these issues.
The more people demand action, the more likely we are to see real change.
So it's a combination of individual actions, consumer choices, and collective action.
It's all connected.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive so far.
We have.
From the latest trends and projections to the policy choices and individual actions that will shape the energy future.
Yeah, a lot to unpack.
But now it's time to go a little bit deeper
Okay.
and explore how this energy transition might play out in different parts of the world.
Yeah, let's get specific.
Okay, so let's dive back in. So we've been talking about these global trends, but the report also says that this energy transition won't look the same everywhere.
Right. It's a global story with a lot of local variations.
So I'm curious how this might play out in different regions or different countries, because each place has its own kind of unique challenges and opportunities. Yeah, absolutely. The global trends are important, but local factors will really shape how this all unfolds.
Like, what kind of local factors are we talking about?
Well, geography, for one. A country with a lot of hydropower potential is going to have a very different path than a country that's really dependent on imported fossil fuels.
Makes sense.
And then there's the political will and the policies that governments put in place.
Right. Some countries are much more proactive.
Exactly. Some are really pushing for clean energy, phasing out fossil fuels, carbon pricing subsidies for renewables, ambitious targets for energy efficiency.
So policy choices can really make a difference.
A huge impact on how quickly and in what direction the energy transition moves.
And then, of course, there's the level of economic development and technological innovation.
Yeah, countries with advanced economies, strong R&D capabilities, they might be better positioned to develop and deploy new clean energy technology.
Yeah, makes sense.
But even countries with limited resources can make progress by adopting existing technologies and implementing policies that encourage investment in clean energy.
So it's kind of a complex mix of factors.
It is geography, resources, politics, economics, technology.
No one-size-fits-all solution.
Nope. Each country's got to figure out its own path.
What about for you? I mean, as you were reading through this report, what stood out to you as being particularly surprising or thought-provoking?
I think the most striking thing for me is just how fast this transition is happening.
Yeah.
I mean, just a few years ago, peak oil demand seemed like this distant possibility.
Right.
And now the IEA is saying it'll happen this decade.
Wow.
It's really remarkable. It shows you how much momentum is building behind clean energy.
Yeah, and it's not just driven by like policy or environmental concerns.
No, economics is playing a huge role.
Renewables are getting cheaper.
Exactly. In many cases, they're the most cost-effective option.
So it's like the market is driving this transition as much as anything else.
Yeah, when clean energy becomes the cheapest choice, it changes the whole conversation.
Yeah, it's no longer a question of should we.
It's a question of how quickly can we.
Right.
It's not if, it's when and how.
Beyond all the data and the projections, the thing that I find most thought-provoking about this report is this vision of the future. It's painting.
It is a compelling vision.
It's a fundamentally different energy future.
Cleaner, more sustainable, more secure, more equitable.
It feels achievable.
It does, and it highlights how this energy transition is connected to all these broader goals.
Social and economic progress.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have an opportunity to create an energy system that not only addresses climate change, but also improves people's lives.
Yeah, creates a more just world.
Yeah, but achieving that vision is going to require all of us to work together.
It's a collective effort.
Governments, companies, individuals, we all have a role to play.
It's not just about setting targets.
Or developing new technologies.
It's about making choices in our everyday lives.
Advocating for change, holding our leaders accountable.
And having those tough conversations.
Yes, the ones that make us question our assumptions.
Challenge our biases.
And work together to find solutions that benefit everyone.
Yeah, we need to be open to different viewpoints and approaches.
If we want to create an energy future that works for all of us.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world energy outlook, I'm feeling a sense of urgency.
Yeah, the clock is ticking.
But also a sense of hope.
The challenges are real, but the possibilities are exciting.
The world is at a crossroads, and the choices we make now will have a huge impact.
We have the knowledge, the technology, the resources to make this transition a success.
But it's up to us to act.
Decisively and collaboratively.
To create a cleaner, more sustainable, more equitable energy future.
That's the goal.
And to bring it back to you, the listener.
Yeah, you're part of this too.
The IEA report paints a global picture, but the energy transition is ultimately a local story.
It's happening in your community.
So we encourage you to explore how these trends might play out in your own region or country.
Think about the challenges and opportunities you face.
What are the specific actions you can take
to contribute to this transition?
Remember, we all have a role to play.
Whether it's advocating for policy changes,
adopting clean energy solutions,
or simply making more conscious choices in your daily life.
Your actions matter.
They do.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We hope you found it insightful.
And empowering.
Until next time, stay curious.
And stay engaged. So we've talked about these global trends and how the energy transition won't look the same everywhere.
Right. It's a global story with a lot of local nuances.
And I'm curious to get into some more specifics now.
Yeah, let's dig deeper.
Like how this transition might actually play out in different parts of the world.
Okay.
Because as we've said, each place is going to face its own kind of unique challenges and opportunities.
Absolutely. The IEA report makes it very clear that you can't just take a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right. So what are some of those challenges and opportunities? I mean, what are the things that might make the energy transition look different in different places?
Well, a lot of it comes down to those local factors we were talking about earlier.
Like geography and resources.
Exactly. I mean, if you're a country with abundant hydropower potential, you're going to have a very different path than a country that's heavily reliant on imported fossil fuel.
Right. It makes sense.
And then there's the political landscape, the policy frameworks that governments put in place.
Okay, so some countries might be more proactive in supporting clean energy.
Absolutely. They might implement carbon pricing mechanisms, offer subsidies for renewables, set ambitious targets for energy efficiency.
And those policy choices can really make a difference.
Oh, they can have a huge impact on the pace and direction of the transition.
And what about things like economic development and technological innovation?
Those are crucial too. I mean, countries with advanced economies, strong R&D capabilities, they might be better positioned to develop and deploy new clean energy technologies.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But even countries with more limited resources can make significant progress.
Oh.
By adopting existing technologies and implementing smart policies that encourage investment in clean energy.
So it's really a complex interplay of all these different factors.
It is geography, resources, politics, economics, technology.
It's not a simple equation.
No, it's not. And that's why the IEA emphasizes the need for tailored solutions.
Right. Each country needs to find its own unique pathway.
Exactly.
So as you were looking through this report, what were some of the things that really stood out to you? I mean, what surprised you or what got you thinking?
You know, honestly, I think the most striking thing for me is just the sheer speed at which this transition is happening.
Yeah, it's moving fast.
It is. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that people were debating whether peak oil demand would ever happen.
Right.
And now the IEA is projecting that it'll happen within this decade.
That's pretty incredible.
It is. And I think it really speaks to the momentum that's building behind clean energy, driven by those rapid technological advancements and decreasing costs we talked about.
Yeah, it's not just about environmental concerns anymore.
No, it's about economics, too.
Yeah.
I mean, renewables are becoming the most cost-effective option in many cases.
So it's like the market is kind of pushing this transition forward.
Yeah, and that makes it much more likely to succeed.
It changes the whole conversation.
It does. When clean energy becomes the cheapest choice, It's no longer a question of should we transition, it's how quickly can we transition.
It's not if anymore, it's when and how.
Exactly.
Beyond all the data and the projections, the thing I find most thought-provoking about this report is the vision it's presenting.
It's a compelling vision.
It is. It's like this fundamentally different energy future.
Cleaner, more sustainable, more secure, more equitable.
And it feels achievable.
It does, and it really highlights how this energy transition is interconnected with all these broader goals of social and economic progress.
Right. It's not just about reducing emissions.
It's about creating a better world for everyone.
But to get there, we need a collective effort.
Absolutely. It's not just about governments setting targets or companies developing new technologies.
It's about all of us.
Making conscious choices in our daily lives, advocating for change, holding our leaders accountable.
And being willing to have those tough conversations.
Yeah, the ones that challenge us to think differently.
To examine our own assumptions and biases.
And to work together to find solutions that benefit everyone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world energy outlook,
Yeah.
I'm feeling a sense of urgency,
The clock is ticking.
but also a sense of hope.
The challenges are significant, but so are the opportunities.
We have the knowledge, the technologies, the resources to make this transition a success.
We do.
It's up to us to act decisively and collaboratively.
To create that cleaner, more sustainable, more equitable energy future.
And to bring it back to you, the listener.
Yes, you're a part of this too.
The IEA report paints a global picture, but the energy transition is ultimately a local story.
It's happening in your community.
So think about how these trends might play out in your own region or country.
What are the unique challenges and opportunities you face
What are the specific actions you can take?
to contribute to this transition?
Remember, we all have a role to play.
Whether it's advocating for policy changes, adopting clean energy solutions, or just making more conscious choices in your daily life.
Your actions matter.
They do.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the World Energy Outlook.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
We hope you found it insightful and empowering.
Until next time, stay curious and stay engaged.